Good afternoon. It is Wednesday, October the 5th. It is about 3 o'clock p.m. This is Shay Gibson with Weather Flow and Wind Alert, bringing you a Tropics update as we continue to watch Hurricane Matthew, Category 3 storm, turning up towards the southern Bahama Island chain. So as of the 2 o'clock p.m. update, the National Hurricane Center has winds at 120 miles per hour, up from 115 this morning. Pressure is at 963 millibars, and now the direction is starting to tilt to the northwest at about 12 miles per hour and head towards the Florida coastline. Let's take a quick look at the visible satellite imagery for Matthew. And we can see earlier today, this morning, as the storm was exiting to the north of eastern Cuba, the mountainous zones and mountainous terrain and some of the dry air aloft did have some effects on the outer eye wall, so it collapsed, but it is now looks like it is starting to rebuild again and develop a more well-defined center. So as a Category 3 at 120, this could go back to a Category 4 storm. In fact, in our wind alert storm track viewer, this is according to National Hurricane Center, it is expected or forecast to become a Category 4 once again as it approaches the Florida coastline. So we'll take a quick look at the track of the system. And we can see that as of the 2 p.m. update, this does keep it as a major hurricane all the way through the Bahamas and even over towards the coast of Florida. So the cone of uncertainty definitely has a wider margin of error as far as the track goes. This could go inland on Florida and then up the coastline where it could have a chance to weaken, or it could stay just along the coast and keep its strength at least up towards Georgia and even into the Carolinas as at least a Category 1 or 2 hurricane. So that is not out of the question as of right now. This storm could intensify even more as a very strong Category 4. We saw Joaquin last year intensify to a Category 5 briefly before it headed to the north. There are some cooler waters. First, let's talk about the tropical cyclone heat potential for the area. The Bahamas, we see these reds and oranges, and that means that there is some abundant warm water at the surface available, and deeper in some of the deeper waters, that warm water layer is a little bit deeper in the pelagic zone, or the epipelagic zone to be exact. And so as the system moves up into these islands, we have a lot of potential for surface fueling for the system. There is going to be relaxed upper shear in that area as well. In fact, if we look at the water vapor loop imagery for this, and I'll go ahead and activate the epic pin here. I want to make sure I get some drawing on. There was a weak trough right here that's been inundated with dry air, kind of dipping down across the Gulf of Mexico and across Florida. And so this trough is eroding, and then we have another trough coming up across here. But all of this area out here is a very moist environment for the system to move up into, and there's no shear aloft over the system, so that means there's relaxed upper shear and warm waters, a really good environment for systems to sort of strengthen in intensity. The sea surface temperatures in general from the latest NASA Sport SST product as of today, I was waiting on this to come out because it's really important to capture what the water temperatures are. In this area, the northern Bahamas, we're still seeing 86 to 87 degree water temperatures, and even up the Gulf Stream off of the Carolina coast, the waters are still 86 degrees, so it's going to have a lot of surface fuel from these warmer waters here. We do have a northeast wedge set up with northeast winds really cranking down the Carolina coast right now, so that's bringing some cooler waters. These shelf waters are about actually they dropped down to about 78 to 79 degrees over the last 24 hours, and we may see that continue to drop another degree or two as these northeast winds are very persistent from high pressure to the north over the next couple of days. So 78 to 80 degree water here, and then out here 86 degrees. So if the storm moves in towards the Florida coastline, it's going to be over cooler waters with some cooler air diving down from the northeast into it. So that may help limit its capacity to maintain a major hurricane status and also hinder its development of convective outflow or convective feed for the storm. There's also some drier air moving in from the west as well, and some upper shear that may be getting onto the system. So we'll take a look at that as well. If we look at Datascope for the east coast, we see the winds here. You can see the northeast wedge set up along the east coast or the southeast region, and the winds are really cranking up. We have northerly winds here. We have northeast winds up along the Outer Banks. Southeast North Carolina, we're seeing 20 and 26 knots, gusting up into the 30s. So we have a nice little cool wedge set up here that's cooling the water temperatures down. This all may be helpful to diminish the system somewhat or have it weaken as it enters into this area in time. If we take any station now, if we look at some of the coastal stations of Florida and we look at the track of Matthew, we see how close it comes. I'm just going to kind of spin the bottle and pick any point here along Florida and take a look and see what the wind probabilities or the wind statistics are for that area from the GFS model. So here's the GFS for the next 7 days out. I'll go ahead and blow this up. And you can see right now as of Friday, as the storm enters towards the Florida coast with these wraparound northerly winds, we see the winds really crank up to 76 miles an hour with gusts to 98. That's what the GFS is reading as far as Indian River. And this is kind of close to if we go back to Datascope, I want to take a look and see. It's near Cocoa Beach, but any of these points may show these winds or even higher winds than this. So this is just kind of a point nearby where the storm is estimated to come very close. And then we see the winds switch up by 8 o'clock a.m. Friday morning, and then come up from the south as the system exits to the north. So we can see those winds come up again. So just because the first round of winds comes down, that doesn't mean the storm is over. There's usually a secondary wind that comes up, a wraparound wind effect. So always be on the lookout for that, and that has gusts up to 86 miles per hour. So keep an eye on that. The storm surge for that area looks like the waves could be about 15 feet along the coastline. The storm surge is going to depend on how strong the system is. When you're looking at a Category 3 hurricane, or Category 3 to a Category 4, you're looking at anywhere from 9 to 18 feet on the surge, and then 15-foot waves, and you can have a really bad flooding issue for those areas. So let's take a look at the jet stream. Now, when we talk about where the system is going to be in the next 48 to 96 hours, or the next 3 to 4 days, we're looking at this area along the southeast coast. Florida, of course, is almost going to be an imminent problem with winds and hurricane force winds and tropical storm force winds, along with heavy rains and banding. But as we get up further towards the southeast coast, one thing we're looking at in the modeling is the jet stream. So we'll take a look at the modeling first for GFS, and we want to do this run from the 12 o'clock. There'll be another one coming out at 6 o'clock. But you see how close the GFS brings it. It actually brings it into Florida and then swoops back out into the ocean while weakening the system. And then it kind of loops it out from the coastline or hooks it east. So that's the latest GFS reading. However, if we look at the Euro reading, the latest Euro from 12 o'clock today has this nudging a little bit further north. And I'll explain that in just a second. So it looks like Charleston could see this landfall. As far as this is concerned, looks like we could have a double landfall, maybe in Florida and then coming back off the coastline and then maybe into Charleston. This is just one run from the Euro. It's not for sure. None of these models are absolutely certain right now. One thing we do know is that it is heading to the northwest through the Bahamas and towards Florida. Beyond that, once it makes a more northerly turn, it becomes very uncertain as far as where it may end up in this area. So we look at the upper dynamics, and what we're looking for is a jet stream to come across in association with a weak trough. And so the models were reading that this trough was deepening down into the country, and that this jet stream, this actual southwesterly jet or west-southwest jet, would make it here and pull the storm away sooner. But it looks like this trough and this upper jet may stay a little bit further to the north, and it may not make it here in time to pull this system off to the east. The GFS does read it pulling it to the east a little sooner, and we also have high pressure building down here over the Bahamas behind the system that may help to do that. But and that's an upper high, and if we look at the Euro model for the upper dynamics, we'll go into the 500 millibar range on this, and we see that the trough stays further north than the GFS, and then that doesn't happen until later when we have a ridge building across central United States. So we actually have sort of this kind of a wind or zonal flow from the west coming in, and also this is expected to weaken the system. It was earlier believed it was going to weaken the system as it moved up towards this area, but it looks like the ridge may not build in until a little bit later, so we could be talking an extra day before anything really happens to draw the system off of the coastline towards the east or the northeast. So the Euro is kind of trending back towards the north into the South Carolina coast once it curves in towards Florida. So that's something to watch. It's not definite, but it definitely is a concern, because I do expect that the National Hurricane Center may readjust their track at the 5 p.m. update. So here's the jet stream again. And we put this in motion. This is 300 millibars, or about 30,000 feet. And we see the jet stream coming across by Thursday, and as Friday comes on, this dip was more pronounced in the earlier models. It actually came down into here, but as we see, and we move into time, that jet stays to the north. It doesn't make it all the way down, so your westerly flow aloft that may be steering the system off the coastline sooner remains a little bit further back to the west. And then as we go further in time, this is for Saturday at about 8 o'clock in the morning, as we go into the next day, or that night, Saturday night, we see that the upper jet stays a little bit to the north of the southeast region. So this may be an opportunity for the storm to make more of a pronounced landfall along South Carolina, and that is not definite yet, but that's what the Euro is trending towards right now. So the water potential for rains We see the swath of rain from the WPC, the Weather Prediction Center. This tends to be a pretty good product, but right now this is going to be a little bit shifty depending on the swath of the storm or the wobble that it makes within the cone of uncertainty. So we see the winds here along the Florida coast at 14.2 inches. This may be a reality for coastal Florida and even parts of inland seeing several inches of rain. But as we get up into the Carolinas, depending on how fast the system moves or how much rain it brings, this number 17 inches offshore could become more like a foot of rain along coastal South Carolina and even parts of southeast North Carolina. So all these areas need to be watching the system very closely and preparing for flooding, because flooding may be a big concern for all these coastal locales with the rain and the storm surge involved with it. It depends on how strong the storm is when it comes towards the Florida coast and how much it maintains its major hurricane status as it moves up the coastline. We're expecting Category 1 or 2 strength by the time it gets here if it does move into this area. However, it's not off the table that it could maintain a stronger presence in the area or stronger force winds. So we take a look at the hurricane track one more time. I want to take a quick peek at the wind speed probabilities. Now here is this is from 8 o'clock a.m. So this will be adjusted sometime this afternoon. They may do one at 5 o'clock p.m. to adjust the tropical storm force wind speed probabilities. And you can see the Florida coast has very high percentage, almost 100% to see tropical storm force winds at the very least. South Carolina, Georgia, all seeing 60 to 70% chance, and even in the southeast North Carolina, you see the chance drop off there. If we look at the 50-knot wind speed probabilities, we see that the chances start to fall off for Georgia and South Carolina. We see only a 30 to 40% chance there. As we get down into Florida, of course, this state remains at a higher percentage at 70%. And if we look at the hurricane wind speed probability, and like I said, this is from this morning, so this is likely to change. But as of 8 o'clock a.m., it kept the probabilities around 50 to 60% for Florida, and that should be increased by the next one. And then you can see the swathing up into Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina being significantly less. So I'm looking forward to see what this probability map shows on the next update, but at least you get a pretty decent guidance of what to expect. So tune into your local National Weather Service offices. They're going to have all the information that you need up and down the coastline. They're going to be the best place to go to for information, for your local information, for any small craft advisories or any kind of warnings or watches or any kind of advisories in effect, flash flooding. We're also talking about the possibility of tornadoes with the system. That's always a possibility with tropical storms or hurricanes, is tornadic activity along land. So there's several severe entities to consider when you have a storm like this. And so tune into the National Hurricane Center. They'll have general forecasts with your watches and warnings. In fact, if we go back and take a look at what the watches and warnings, we see the hurricane warning, Lake Okeechobee, southeastern Florida, all the way up, extending up towards Daytona. The watch extends all the way through Jacksonville, and I do expect in time that the watch will enter into Georgia and kind of follow suit. And we're going to be really watching this Euro model very closely. I want to take one more look at that and show what the possibility is for the track on the Euro. This one actually hugs the coast a little bit more in Florida and then brings it up towards the South Carolina coast for a landfall up that way before hooking out to the east. So southeast North Carolina also needs to be on guard for this as well, because the system could have widespread effects all the way up through the Outer Banks. And that's going to do it for this version of the Tropical Update. Stay safe, have a plan, and thanks for watching. I'll try to get on live tonight on my Shay Gibson Weatherflow Facebook page, or maybe even this afternoon. I may do a quick live cast there. But until then, thanks a lot, and take care.